The crisp Parisian air swirled around Charlotte Vance as she stepped out of the Charles de Gaulle airport, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere she'd left behind in New York. This trip, a family vacation to Paris, was ostensibly to celebrate Seraphina's burgeoning art career, though Charlotte knew it was simply another opportunity for their parents, Harold and Beatrice, to shower their golden child with adoration and resources. Charlotte, the elder by 4 years, had long ago resigned herself to the role of the supporting character in the Vance family drama. The taxi ride to the hotel was a silent symphony of resentment brewing within Charlotte. Her parents, seated in the front, chattered excitedly about Seraphina's potential and the amazing opportunities that Paris held for her. Seraphina, predictably, soaked it all in, her face flushed with a mixture of self-importance and feigned humility. Charlotte, relegated to the back seat, stared out the window, the picturesque Parisian streets blurring into a meaningless tapestry of privilege. Their destination was the Hotel L'Etoile Royale, a ridiculously opulent establishment nestled in the heart of the 8th arrondissement. It was the kind of place that screamed old money and exclusivity, a far cry from Charlotte's own tastefully minimalist flat in Shoreditch. Charlotte had a successful career as an architect, designing sleek, modern buildings that were earning her accolades and a comfortable income. Yet, in her parents' eyes, her achievements were always secondary to Seraphina's perpetually promising artistic endeavors. The check-in process mirrored the familiar family dynamic. Beatrice, with her perfectly coiffed hair and designer handbag, handed her credit card to the receptionist. "We have a reservation under Vance. The deluxe suite, I believe." The receptionist, a young woman with an impeccably polite demeanor, typed away on her computer. "Let me see. Ah, yes, Madame Vance. For 3 nights?" Beatrice nodded, already turning to Seraphina to discuss their planned itinerary, which, of course, revolved entirely around Seraphina's interests, gallery visits, meetings with influential art figures, and expensive dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. Charlotte was, as usual, an afterthought. Charlotte had reached her breaking point weeks before the trip, during a particularly galling family dinner. The conversation, naturally, centered on Seraphina. "We've been thinking," Harold had announced, his voice brimming with paternal pride, "that a trip to Paris would be just the thing to inspire Seraphina. Immerse her in the art scene, you know." Beatrice had chimed in. "And we've found the most darling little hotel. It's a bit cozy, but perfect for Seraphina to soak up the atmosphere." Charlotte had taken a slow sip of her wine, a bitter taste coating her tongue. "Cozy?" she'd asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Well, yes," Beatrice had replied, waving her hand dismissively. "It's a standard room, but Seraphina needs a comfortable bed to rest after all her artistic explorations." "You can take the sofa bed, Charlotte. You're used to roughing it, aren't you?" That was the moment. The casual dismissal, the assumption that she would, as always, accommodate Seraphina's needs without complaint, had finally shattered the carefully constructed dam of Charlotte's patience. She'd spent her entire life playing second fiddle, sacrificing her own desires for the sake of her sister's supposed brilliance. Enough was enough. So, while her parents blithely assumed she would meekly accept her role as the family doormat, Charlotte had quietly hatched a plan. A plan for recompense. A plan for a Parisian revolution. Back at the Hotel L'Etoile Royale, as Beatrice continued to outline their Seraphina-centric schedule, Charlotte stepped forward, a subtle smirk playing on her lips. "Actually," she said, her voice clear and steady, "I made the reservation." Harold and Beatrice turned to her, their expressions a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "What do you mean, Charlotte?" Harold asked, his brow furrowed. Charlotte pulled out her phone, displaying the confirmation email from the hotel. "I decided to handle the booking myself. After all, I am paying for my own trip." The receptionist, sensing a shift in the power dynamic, looked up from her computer. "Ah, yes, Mademoiselle Vance. I see your reservation here. The Imperial Suite." A beat of silence descended upon the lobby. Beatrice's perfectly crafted smile faltered. Seraphina's eyes widened in disbelief. Harold simply stared, his mouth slightly agape. The Imperial Suite? Beatrice stammered, her voice losing its usual air of authority. Charlotte nodded, savoring the moment. Yes. It's quite spacious. A master bedroom, a guest bedroom, a living area, a dining room, and a private balcony with a view of the Eiffel Tower. The receptionist continued, her voice now tinged with a hint of amusement. The Imperial Suite also comes with complimentary champagne, a personal butler service, and access to the hotel's exclusive spa. Seraphina, her face now a mask of petulant anger, found her voice. You're joking, right? You booked the Imperial Suite? Charlotte crossed her arms, her expression unwavering. I'm not joking. I decided that if I was going to be dragged along on this family vacation, I might as well enjoy myself. And frankly, I'm tired of sleeping on sofa beds. Harold, finally recovering from his shock, sputtered. But that's exorbitant. We can't afford. Charlotte cut him off. You can't afford it. I can. And I did. The realization dawned on her parents. Charlotte, the quiet, accommodating daughter, had finally asserted herself. And she had done so in a way that left them utterly speechless. The tension in the lobby was palpable. The receptionist, clearly enjoying the unfolding drama, discreetly handed Charlotte the key cards to the Imperial Suite. Enjoy your stay, Mademoiselle Vance. She said, a subtle wink accompanying her words. Charlotte took the keys, her smile widening. Thank you. I intend to. She turned to her family, her gaze sweeping over their stunned faces. I'll be upstairs. You can figure out the sleeping arrangements yourselves. With that, she turned and walked towards the elevators, leaving her family to stew in their own self-created mess. The Imperial Suite was everything Charlotte had hoped for and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the Parisian skyline. The furnishings were opulent yet tasteful, a blend of classic French elegance and modern luxury. The master bedroom, with its king-sized bed and plush linens, was a sanctuary of comfort. Charlotte dropped her bags, kicked off her shoes, and sank into a plush armchair, letting out a long, satisfied sigh. For the first time in her life, she felt truly in control. The inevitable knock on the door came sooner than she expected. Charlotte took her time answering, letting the anticipation build. When she finally opened the door, she found Seraphina standing there, her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of fury and entitlement. You can't do this, Charlotte. Seraphina hissed, her voice tight with anger. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. Do what? Enjoy the fruits of my own labor? This is my trip. Seraphina exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. You're ruining everything. Charlotte leaned against the doorframe, her gaze unwavering. Your trip. I seem to recall this being a family vacation. And last I checked, I'm still part of the family. Beatrice and Harold appeared behind Seraphina, their expressions a mixture of frustration and embarrassment. Charlotte, dear. Beatrice began, her voice strained. Please be reasonable. You know Seraphina needs a proper bed to rest. She's very sensitive. Charlotte stared at her mother, her patience wearing thin. Sensitive? She's spoiled. And I'm done catering to her every whim. Harold stepped forward, his face reddening. We're a family, Charlotte. We should be sharing. Charlotte let out a dry laugh. Sharing? That's rich, coming from the people who've spent my entire life prioritizing Seraphina's needs over mine. Silence descended upon the hallway. Seraphina, sensing her parents' wavering resolve, tried a different tactic. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Just switch rooms with me. It's not a big deal. Charlotte shook her head. No. I booked this suite. I paid for it. And I'm staying in it. Beatrice sighed, rubbing her temples. But where are we supposed to sleep? Charlotte shrugged. There's a guest bedroom. It has a queen-sized bed. You can figure it out. Seraphina clenched her fists. I'm not sleeping in a guest bedroom. Charlotte smiled, a hint of malice in her eyes. Then I suggest you find another hotel. Or perhaps sleep on the sofa. You're so good at making do, aren't you? With that, she closed the door, leaving her family standing in the hallway, their carefully constructed world of privilege crumbling around them. Charlotte spent the next few hours indulging in the luxuries of the imperial suite. She ordered room service, a decadent meal of French delicacies, and a bottle of expensive champagne. She took a long, hot bath in the marble bathroom, surrounded by scented candles and plush towels. She wrapped herself in a soft robe and sat on the balcony, gazing out at the twinkling lights of the Eiffel Tower. But her victory felt incomplete. She knew her family wouldn't simply accept their defeat. They would, undoubtedly, try to find a way to undermine her, to reclaim their control. And she was right. The next morning, Charlotte woke to a barrage of missed calls and text messages from her parents. They demanded she meet them for breakfast in the hotel's restaurant. Reluctantly, she agreed. She knew this was just the beginning of another round of manipulation and guilt-tripping. When she arrived at the restaurant, she found her parents and Seraphina already seated, a lavish spread of pastries, fruit, and coffee laid out before them. Charlotte, darling, Beatrice began, her voice sickly sweet. We've been thinking. Charlotte raised an eyebrow, cutting her off. Let me guess. You want me to switch rooms? Harold cleared his throat. Well, we were hoping we could find a compromise. Charlotte took a sip of her coffee, her expression unreadable. What kind of compromise? Beatrice leaned forward, her eyes pleading. We were thinking, if we pooled our resources, we could perhaps upgrade to a larger suite. Something that would accommodate all of us comfortably. Charlotte knew exactly where this was going. And by pool our resources, you mean you want me to pay for it? Silence. Harold and Beatrice exchanged a nervous glance. Well, Harold stammered. You did already spend a considerable amount on the imperial suite. Charlotte let out a sharp laugh. You have got to be kidding me. You expect me to pay for another upgrade, after you've already tried to force me to sleep on a sofa bed? Seraphina, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up. It's not a big deal, Charlotte. You can afford it. Charlotte turned to her sister, her voice icy. It's the principle of the thing, Seraphina. You've spent your entire life getting everything handed to you. It's time you learned what it means to earn something for yourself. She stood up, tossing her napkin onto the table. I'm not paying for another upgrade. If you want a larger suite, you can pay for it yourselves. She walked away, leaving her family to stew in their own frustration. But she knew this wasn't over. They would try again. And they did. Later that afternoon, Charlotte decided to explore Paris on her own. She wandered through the charming streets of Montmartre, browsed the art stalls along the Seine, and enjoyed a quiet coffee at a small café. As she was sitting at the café, her phone rang. It was Beatrice. Charlotte, dear, Beatrice said, her voice sounding unusually urgent. We need to talk. Can you meet us back at the hotel? Charlotte hesitated. She didn't trust her parents, not one bit. But a part of her, the part that still craved their approval, couldn't resist the urge to see what they were up to. Fine, she said, her voice reluctant. I'll be there in an hour. When she arrived at the hotel, she found her parents and Seraphina waiting for her in the lobby. They were dressed in their finest clothes, looking as if they were attending a gala. What's going on? Charlotte asked, her suspicion growing. Beatrice smiled, a tight, strained smile. We have a surprise for you. Before Charlotte could respond, Harold led her towards the hotel's grand ballroom. The doors were opened, revealing a lavishly decorated room. Tables were set with fine china and crystal glassware. A string quartet played softly in the background. What is all this? Charlotte asked, her confusion mounting. Beatrice stepped forward, her eyes gleaming. We've arranged a special dinner for you. To celebrate your success. Charlotte was stunned. This was completely unexpected. Her parents had never thrown her a party, not even for her graduation or her professional achievements. I don't understand. She stammered. Harold smiled, a rare, genuine smile. We just wanted to show you how proud we are of you, Charlotte. Seraphina, surprisingly, chimed in. Yeah, Charlotte. You deserve it. Charlotte was overwhelmed. Could it be? Had her parents finally realized her worth? Had they finally seen her as more than just the other daughter? She was led to the head of the table, between Harold and Beatrice, and across from Seraphina. We know we haven't always been the best parents, Beatrice said. But we do love you. Charlotte had tears in her eyes. Maybe this trip wasn't such a bad idea after all. As the waiter came by and served them each a glass of champagne, Harold raised his glass. To Charlotte. To Charlotte. The others echoed. Charlotte beamed as she clinked glasses, feeling, for once, a true sense of family belonging. As she took a sip of her champagne, however, she started feeling woozy. Her vision started blurring. What's going on? She slurred. She looked up to see the blurry faces of her family, and they weren't smiling anymore. Beatrice had a cruel smirk on her face. We just needed to get you out of that suite. Harold nodded in agreement. The hotel manager said that with you incapacitated, they can move your things to a standard room. Seraphina laughed. And I get the master bedroom. Thanks, sis. Charlotte tried to stand, but she was too weak. She collapsed back into her chair, her head spinning. The last thing she saw before she blacked out was her family, their faces twisted with malice, raising their glasses in a mock toast. Charlotte woke up in a small, cramped room. The walls were bare, the furniture was cheap, and the window overlooked a dingy alleyway. Her head was pounding, her body ached, and her stomach churned. She sat up, trying to piece together what had happened. The memories came flooding back, the lavish dinner, the champagne, the betrayal. Her family had drugged her. They had used her own desire for their approval against her. They had stolen her suite, her victory, her moment of triumph. Rage, hot and fierce, surged through her veins. She had been naive, foolish, to believe that they had changed. They were still the same selfish, manipulative people they had always been. But this time, she wouldn't let them get away with it. This time, she would fight back. She stumbled out of bed, her legs still shaky. She found her phone, miraculously still in her purse. She dialed the number of the hotel's concierge, Monsieur Dubois, a kind, elderly man who had been particularly helpful during her stay. Monsieur Dubois, she said, her voice trembling with anger. This is Charlotte Vance. I need your help. She explained what had happened, her voice growing stronger with each word. Monsieur Dubois listened patiently, his voice filled with concern. Mademoiselle Vance, he said, his voice firm. I am so sorry this has happened. I will do everything I can to help you. He promised to investigate the situation, to speak with the hotel manager, and to gather evidence of her family's treachery. Charlotte hung up the phone, a glimmer of hope flickering within her. She wouldn't let her family win. She would reclaim what was rightfully hers. Over the next few hours, Charlotte worked with Monsieur Dubois to gather evidence. He provided her with security footage of her family drugging her champagne, statements from the waiters who had witnessed their behavior, and copies of the hotel records showing the room change. Charlotte met with the local police and filed an official report against her family. Armed with this evidence, Charlotte confronted her family. She found them in the hotel's lobby, preparing to check out. You think you can get away with this? She said, her voice cold and hard. Harold, Beatrice, and Seraphina turned to her, their faces a mixture of shock and fear. Charlotte, Beatrice began, her voice trembling. We can explain. Charlotte cut her off. I have all the evidence I need. Security footage, witness statements, hotel records. You drugged me, you stole my suite, and you tried to defraud the hotel. She held up her phone, displaying the police report. I've also filed a police report. You're going to be facing charges. Her family's faces paled. They had underestimated her. They had thought she was weak, easily manipulated. They had been wrong. The hotel manager, alerted by Monsieur Dubois, arrived on the scene. He confirmed Charlotte's story and informed her family that they were no longer welcome at the hotel. The police arrived shortly after, taking Harold, Beatrice, and Seraphina into custody. Charlotte watched as her family was led away, their faces filled with shame and regret. She felt a surge of satisfaction, a sense of vindication. But it was a bittersweet victory. The damage to their relationship was irreparable. Charlotte returned to the imperial suite, her rightful domain. She spent the remaining days of her trip enjoying the luxuries she had earned, but the joy was tinged with sadness. She decided to extend her trip, to savor the moment of freedom and begin the long journey of healing. One afternoon, Charlotte paid a visit to a renowned art gallery, owned by Madame Sophie. It was purely by chance she stumbled upon it. Madame Sophie greeted Charlotte warmly, and upon realizing her last name, a spark of recognition flashed. Vance? Any relation to Seraphina? Charlotte stiffened, but said, She's my sister. Madame Sophie frowned. I must say, that girl has no talent. She tried to pass off some rather mediocre pieces as groundbreaking art. Your parents were quite insistent, though. Charlotte wasn't surprised. She was about to change the subject when Madame Sophie continued. But you have an architect's eye, don't you? Your sketches in the hotel guest book, the way you described the lines of the building, remarkable. Charlotte was taken aback. She'd idly doodled in the guest book, a habit from her profession. Yes, I am an architect. Madame Sophie smiled. I thought so. Would you be interested in collaborating on a project? I'm looking for someone to design a new wing for the gallery. Something modern, yet respectful of the Parisian landscape. Charlotte's heart skipped a beat. This was an incredible opportunity, a chance to showcase her talent in one of the world's most prestigious art capitals. I would be honored, she said, her voice filled with excitement. As Charlotte left the gallery, a sense of exhilaration washed over her. Her family's betrayal had been painful, but it had also freed her. It had forced her to confront their toxic dynamic and to forge her own path. And now, in the heart of Paris, she had found not only recompense for their cruelty, but also a chance to build a future brighter than she had ever imagined. She walked along the Seine, the setting sun casting a golden glow on the city. She smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. She had won. Not just the suite, but her life back. She stopped at the cafe she had been to the day before. Antoine, the waiter, recognized her. Mademoiselle. Back again? The usual? Charlotte nodded. As she sat, looking over the river, she had a small conversation with Antoine, in her improving French. He commented how much happier she looked compared to her last visit. Charlotte simply said things had worked out for the best. And, as Charlotte sipped her coffee, she had the most amazing idea. Her parents' credit card was still on file at the hotel. Charlotte sent a quick message to Monsieur Dubois. The next morning, Harold and Beatrice, fresh from a night in a Parisian jail, were checking their bank account in a seedy internet cafe. Their card was declined, again and again. They were confused and angry. Then Harold got the notification on his phone. An enormous charge, from a Parisian florist. And another, from a high-end chocolate shop. And a third, from a designer luggage store. All near the hotel. Beatrice then saw the news story. A huge headline about a new wing being designed for a famous Parisian art gallery, by up-and-coming architect, Charlotte Vance. Attached to the article was a picture. Charlotte, radiant, holding a bouquet of the most expensive roses, a box of exquisite chocolates, and standing next to several pieces of designer luggage. All gifts, the article said, purchased for the staff of the Hotel L'Etoile Royale, as a thank you for their exceptional service. And, in the background, a tiny figure. Monsieur Dubois, giving a cheeky thumbs up. Harold and Beatrice stared at the screen, in horrified disbelief. Charlotte had not only won, she had rubbed their faces in it. The Parisian recompense was complete. Charlotte continued to find success and satisfaction with her new life in Paris. Her collaboration on the new wing of the art gallery was a smashing success, gaining widespread critical acclaim. She had found her own apartment in a vibrant neighborhood, with a view of the Sacré-Cœur Basilica. She began to learn French fluently, and she started to form new, healthier relationships. She even started dating a charming French artist, who appreciated her for her talents and her strength. She began to receive professional awards, and her parents saw her accomplishments in architectural magazines and journals. It was clear to anyone that she was thriving. The golden child had been tarnished, and the forgotten sister was shining brighter than ever.